The dust stung Lily Bennett's eyes as she ran, her breath coming in desperate gasps. She could hear the thundering hoofbeats behind her growing closer with each passing second, her pursuers' curses carrying on the hot Texas wind. Then, like an apparition emerging from the shimmering heat, a stranger on horseback appeared between them, the broad shoulders of his silhouette blocking the afternoon sun as he positioned himself as a living barrier between hunter and prey. Lily's legs trembled beneath her as she stumbled to a halt, her lungs burning as she tried to catch her breath. Her skirts were torn and coated with the red dust of the plains, her dark hair falling loose from its pins after miles of desperate flight. The year was 1876, and out here in the untamed territories of West Texas, a woman alone had little hope against a determined man. "Keep running for those rocks, miss," the stranger called, his voice deep and steady. "I'll handle this." She hesitated only a moment before obeying, forcing her exhausted body toward the outcropping of boulders. Behind her, she heard the angry shout of her pursuer and the commanding tone of the man who'd intervened. Reaching the shelter of the rocks, she crouched low and turned to watch the confrontation unfold. The stranger sat tall in his saddle, one hand resting casually on his thigh, though Lily noticed his fingers remained close to the pistol holstered at his hip. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out the strong line of his jaw, set firm against the approaching threat. "This ain't your concern, mister," called the man who'd been chasing her. Victor Holloway, her late father's business partner and her unwanted suitor, was red-faced with exertion and fury. "That woman is my property." "No woman is property in these territories," the stranger replied evenly, "or anywhere else I know of." Victor's hand moved toward his gun. "You're making a mistake." "I don't think I am." The stranger didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone made Victor pause. "I count it a poor show of character when a man needs to chase a woman across open country. Makes me wonder what kind of man would do such a thing." "She's my fiancée," Victor lied, "having a fit of nerves before our wedding." From her hiding place, Lily felt a surge of indignation. "That's a lie," she called out, unable to contain herself. "He killed my father and tried to force me to marry him." The stranger's posture shifted slightly, though his eyes never left Victor. "Sounds like the lady disagrees with your account." Victor's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret interfering in my business." "I reckon I've regretted plenty in my life," the stranger replied, "but stopping a man from terrorizing a woman won't be one of them." For a tense moment, Lily thought Victor might draw his weapon, but something in the stranger's steady gaze seemed to give him pause. After a few seconds of hostile silence, Victor spat on the ground. "This isn't over," he snarled, yanking his horse around and spurring it hard. The animal leaped forward, carrying him back toward the direction they'd come from. Only when Victor was a distant figure on the horizon did the stranger turn his horse toward the rocks where Lily hid. As he approached, she got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a storm-swept sky. A thin scar ran along his jawline, and several days' worth of stubble darkened his face. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, dismounting with fluid grace. Lily stood on shaky legs, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. "No, just exhausted. I've been running since dawn." She attempted to smooth her tangled hair. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Zachary Blackwood." He touched the brim of his hat. "Most folks call me Zach. Lily Bennett." She extended a trembling hand, which he took briefly in his calloused one. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Blackwood." "No need for thanks." He glanced in the direction Victor had disappeared. "But we should move on. Men like that tend to return with reinforcements. You believe me then?" About what he did, Zach's expression hardened. "I've seen enough of this world to recognize a desperate woman running for her life from a man with murder in his eyes." He offered her the reins of his horse. "Can you ride?" "Yes, my father taught me." "Good. You take my horse. I'll walk alongside for a spell. There's a town about 5 miles west, Redemption Creek. We can find you safe lodging there while we figure out your next steps." Lily hesitated. "I have no money. Victor took everything when she stopped, the painful memories still too fresh. "Don't worry about that now," Zach said, his voice gentler than before. "One problem at a time." With his help, Lily mounted the horse, a sturdy Palomino gelding with intelligent eyes. As they set off toward the west, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon, she studied her rescuer's profile. There was something in his bearing that spoke of hardship overcome, of battles fought both within and without. "You're a long way from anywhere, Mr. Blackwood," she ventured after they'd traveled in silence for some time. He glanced up at her with the ghost of a smile. "Could say the same about you, Miss Bennett. I was heading for my aunt's ranch near El Paso when Victor caught up with me in the last town. I slipped away before dawn, but he tracked me." She swallowed hard. "If you hadn't come along—" "But I did," he interrupted firmly. "No use dwelling on what might have been." They continued westward as the afternoon waned, the vast expanse of the Texas plains stretching endlessly around them. Lily found herself studying Zach's broad shoulders, the easy way he moved despite the heat and exertion. His revolver was holstered low on his hip in the manner of men who knew how to use such weapons. Yet there was nothing threatening about his presence. Instead, she felt an unfamiliar sense of security in his company. "You never said what brings you to these parts," she said as the silence stretched between them. Zach's pace never faltered. "Just passing through. A drifter, then?" "Something like that." His tone suggested the topic was closed. The sun was nearing the horizon when they crested a small rise, and Redemption Creek came into view. It was a modest settlement, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest. Lamplight had begun to glow in windows as evening approached. "Not much to look at," Zach commented, "but they've got a decent boarding house and a sheriff who keeps order." As they approached the town, Lily became acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance. Her dress was torn in places, her hair a tangled mess, and dust coated every inch of her. "I can't go into town looking like this," she said, dismayed. Zach looked up at her, his expression softening. "You look like someone who survived what would have killed most people. There's no shame in that." His words touched something deep inside her, and she found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you," she whispered. They entered Redemption Creek just as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. A few townsfolk paused in their evening activities to watch them pass a dusty, beautiful woman on horseback, and the tall cowboy walking beside her. Lily felt their curious stares but kept her chin high, drawing strength from Zach's steady presence. He led them to a 2-story building with a sign that read, "Franklin's Boarding House." Tying the horse to the hitching post out front, he offered Lily his hand to help her dismount. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, stiff from the ride and weak from her ordeal. Zach caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy now." The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she quickly straightened, uncomfortable with her reaction to this stranger. "I'm fine," she assured him, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. The boarding house was run by a plump, gray-haired woman named Mrs. Franklin, whose shrewd eyes took in Lily's condition with one glance. To her credit, she asked no questions beyond their names and how long they'd be staying. "Just one night for me," Zach said, placing coins on the counter. "The lady might stay longer." "You're not staying?" Lily asked, surprised by her own disappointment. "Got business elsewhere," he replied vaguely. Mrs. Franklin handed them each a key. "Room 3 for the lady, room 7 for the gentleman. Supper's served until 8, and there's hot water for bathing in the back room." Lily's stomach growled at the mention of food, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since her hasty escape that morning. The thought of a hot bath was equally tempting. Yet she hesitated at the foot of the stairs, turning to Zach. "I have no way to repay you for all this," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Consider it an investment in seeing justice done. Get some rest, Miss Bennett. We'll talk more in the morning." Their eyes met for a long moment, and Lily felt something shift between them, an unspoken understanding, perhaps, or the first fragile threads of trust forming. With a nod, she turned and climbed the stairs, aware of his gaze following her until she disappeared down the hallway. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the main street. Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up with her. Her father's murder, her desperate flight, Victor's pursuit, and now this strange cowboy who'd appeared like an answered prayer. It was almost too much to process. A soft knock at the door startled her. Opening it cautiously, she found a young maid with a steaming pitcher of water and clean towels. "Mrs. Franklin thought you might want to freshen up before supper, miss," the girl said. "Thank you," Lily replied gratefully, accepting the items. Could you tell me something about Mr. Blackwood? Is he known around here?" The maid's eyes widened slightly. "The gentleman who brought you?" "Can't say as I've seen him before, miss, but Mrs. Franklin seemed to recognize him. Said something about him having been a Texas Ranger once." After the maid left, Lily washed away the dust of her journey as best she could and pinned her hair back into some semblance of order. Her dress was beyond saving, but she brushed off the worst of the dirt. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she hardly recognized the pale, determined face that looked back at her. In the span of 2 weeks, she had lost everything: her father, her home, her security. Yet somehow, she was still standing. Downstairs, the boarding house dining room was half full with travelers and a few local residents. Zach sat alone at a corner table, his back to the wall and his eyes on the door, a habit, Lily suspected, born of necessity rather than paranoia. He stood when he saw her, pulling out a chair with a courtesy that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "You clean up nice, Miss Bennett," he said as she took the seat across from him. "As do you, Mr. Blackwood." Indeed, he had washed and changed into a clean shirt, though his face still bore the stubble that shadowed his strong jawline. Mrs. Franklin herself brought them plates heaped with beef stew, cornbread, and boiled greens. Lily hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was before her, and she had to remind herself to eat slowly, like the lady her father had raised her to be. "The maid mentioned you were once a Texas Ranger," she said, after they'd eaten in silence for a few minutes. Zach's eyes narrowed slightly. "People talk too much in small towns." "Were you a ranger, I mean?" he sighed, setting down his fork. "For a time, not anymore." "May I ask why you left?" "You may ask," he replied with a hint of a smile, "but I might not answer." Despite herself, Lily found herself smiling back. There was something about Zachary Blackwood that drew her in, perhaps the contrast between his intimidating exterior and the unexpected kindness he'd shown her. In another life, under different circumstances, she might have been intrigued by such a man, but her current situation left no room for such thoughts. "Tell me about Victor Holloway," Zach said, changing the subject. "What happened with your father?" The question drove all levity from Lily's mind. Setting down her spoon, she took a deep breath. My father owned a successful freight business in San Antonio. Victor was his partner for the last 5 years. I never trusted him, but father thought he was brilliant with numbers. Her voice hardened. What father didn't know was that Victor had been embezzling from the company for years. And your father found out, Lily nodded, fighting back tears. 2 weeks ago. There was a confrontation at our home. Victor shot him and made it look like a robbery gone wrong. Her hands trembled at the memory. No one suspected him. He played the grieving friend perfectly, offering to take care of me by marrying me. When I refused, he became insistent. Zach's expression darkened. And the law did nothing. Victor is well connected in San Antonio. When I went to the sheriff with my suspicions, he dismissed them as a woman's hysteria in the face of tragedy. Bitter anger colored her words. The next day, Victor came to my home with a minister in tow, determined to make me his wife whether I consented or not. I escaped through a window and ran. And he's been hunting you since. Yes, I managed to stay ahead of him until yesterday. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. I need to reach my aunt's ranch near El Paso. It's the only safe place left for me. Zach considered this information, his storm-gray eyes thoughtful. Holloway won't give up easily. Men like him can't stand to lose what they consider theirs. I'm not his, Lily said fiercely. No, Zach agreed, something like admiration flickering in his expression. You certainly are not. After supper, they moved to the small parlor where a few other guests were gathered. Finding a quiet corner, Zach spread out a map of the territories. El Paso is still a good ways off, he said, tracing the route with his finger. Nearly 300 miles, mostly rough country. Lily's heart sank. I'll find a way. Perhaps I could join a wagon train or hire protection. With what money? Zach asked practically. She had no answer for that. He studied the map for a moment longer, then folded it decisively. I'll take you. Lily stared at him in shock. But you said you had business elsewhere. It can wait. Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. Zach was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. Let's just say I understand what it means to be hunted, and I've seen enough innocent people suffer at the hands of men like Holloway. He met her gaze. Besides, I'm heading west anyway. El Paso isn't that far out of my way. I can't ask this of you. You didn't ask. I offered. His tone brooked no argument. We'll leave at first light before Holloway has a chance to track you here. Lily wanted to protest further, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking her. The warmth of the room, the full meal in her stomach, and the relief of having a plan, however temporary, conspired to make her eyelids heavy. Zach noticed her fatigue. Get some sleep, Miss Bennett. Tomorrow will be a long day. As she rose to go upstairs, she paused, looking down at this enigmatic man who'd altered the course of her life with a single act of intervention. Why were you there today? On that particular stretch of road at that exact moment? A shadow passed over his face. Just passing through, he repeated his earlier answer. But something in his eyes told Lily there was more to the story, much more. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she couldn't help but wonder what secrets Zachary Blackwood carried, and why fate had placed him in her path at the precise moment she needed saving. Dawn was just breaking when Lily was awakened by a soft knock at her door. Drowsily, she called out, "Who is it?" "It's Zach. We need to move." The urgency in his voice immediately cleared the fog of sleep from her mind. Hurrying to the door, she opened it to find him fully dressed, his expression grim. "What's wrong?" she asked, already reaching for her boots. "Holloway rode into town an hour ago with 2 men. They're at the saloon now, but it won't take long for them to start asking questions." Lily's heart raced. "How did he find us so quickly?" "Small towns, loose lips," Zach replied tersely. "Can you be ready in 5 minutes?" "Yes." True to her word, Lily was downstairs in less than 5 minutes, having hastily pinned up her hair and gathered her few possessions. Mrs. Franklin met them in the kitchen with a bundle of food and a concerned expression. "There's a back way through the garden," she told them, pointing to a rear door. "Your horse is already saddled and waiting." "Thank you," Zach said, pressing extra coins into the woman's hand. "If anyone asks, I haven't seen hide nor hair of either of you, Mrs." Franklin finished for him with a knowing nod. "Godspeed, young ones." They slipped out through the garden where Zach's palomino was indeed waiting, along with a second horse, a sturdy bay mare. "Where did this one come from?" Lily asked as Zach helped her mount. "Let's just say I made an investment in our mutual safety," he replied, swinging up onto his own horse. "We'll send payment back once we reach El Paso." They rode out of town via a narrow trail that skirted behind the main buildings, avoiding the main street entirely. As the first true light of day spread across the plains, they urged their horses into a steady canter, putting distance between themselves and Redemption Creek. Lily found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see Victor and his men in pursuit. But the trail behind them remained empty as the morning progressed, and gradually she began to relax. They rode in companionable silence for several hours, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and share some of Mrs. Franklin's provisions. By midday, they had covered nearly 20 miles of rolling grassland, the terrain gradually becoming more rugged as they traveled westward. "We'll need to make camp before dark," Zach said as they paused by a small creek to water the horses. "There's a line of hills ahead with good shelter and vantage points." Lily nodded, stretching her stiff muscles. Though she was no stranger to riding, the pace and tension of their flight had left her sore. "How long do you think it will take to reach El Paso?" "At this pace, about 2 weeks, assuming no complications." He gave her an appraising look. "You're holding up well." "My father believed women should be capable," she replied, a sad smile touching her lips at the memory. "He taught me to ride, shoot, and fend for myself. My mother died when I was young, and he said he wouldn't always be there to protect me." Her voice faltered. "He was right about that." Zach was quiet for a moment, seemingly focused on adjusting his saddle. "Your father sounds like a good man. He was the best." Lily blinked back tears, refusing to give in to grief when survival required her full attention. "What about your family? Do they worry about you with your wandering ways?" "Haven't had family to worry about me in a long time," he said, his tone matter-of-fact rather than self-pitying. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. It was a lifetime ago. They remounted and continued westward, the landscape gradually transitioning from open plains to more broken country. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising an evening storm. "We need to find shelter soon," Zach observed, eyeing the approaching weather. "Storms out here can turn dangerous quick." As if in response to his words, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. Their horses flicked their ears nervously, sensing the change in the air. "There," Lily pointed to a formation of rocky outcroppings about a half-mile ahead. "Would that provide enough cover?" Zach nodded approvingly. "Good eye. Let's make for it before the rain hits." They reached the rocks just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. The formation created a natural shelter, a shallow cave with an overhang that would keep them dry. While Lily gathered what dry kindling she could find, Zach unsaddled the horses and secured them in a protected area nearby. The rain intensified rapidly, turning from scattered drops to sheets of water that obscured the view beyond their shelter. Lightning split the darkening sky, followed by crashes of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. Despite the ferocity of the storm, Lily found herself grateful for the forced pause in their journey and the relative security of their position. Zach returned, water streaming from his hat and coat. "Horses are settled," he reported, removing his drenched outer garments and hanging them from a rocky projection to dry. "This storm isn't letting up anytime soon." Working together, they managed to start a small fire using the driest kindling and Zach's skill. The dancing flames cast flickering shadows against the rock walls, creating a small circle of warmth and light against the wild darkness outside. As they shared a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and the last of Mrs. Franklin's biscuits, Lily found herself studying Zach's face in the firelight. The scar along his jaw seemed more pronounced in the shadowy illumination, and his eyes reflected the flames like pools of molten silver. "How did you get that scar?" she asked, the intimate setting making personal questions seem less intrusive. Zach's hand went to his jaw, fingers tracing the thin line as if by reflex. "Knife fight in Laredo about 3 years back. Were you still a ranger then?" "No, that was after." He took a sip from his canteen. "My turn for a question. You said your aunt has a ranch near El Paso. What's her name?" "Might know of the place. Louise Bennett, Rocking Bee Ranch." Lily smiled at the thought of her strong-willed aunt. "She was my father's sister, never married. Built that ranch from nothing after coming west 20 years ago." Recognition flickered in Zach's eyes. "I know of it. Good reputation." "Solid operation. You've been to El Paso before then?" "Passed through a few times." He prodded the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing upward. "Your aunt sounds like a formidable woman." "She is. Father always said she was too stubborn to fail and too ornery to die." Lily's smile faded. "I haven't seen her in 5 years, not since she visited San Antonio for my 18th birthday. I hope she'll take me in." "Family is family," Zach said simply. "And from what I hear, Louise Bennett isn't the type to turn away her own, especially not in trouble." His confidence reassured her, and Lily found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. The constant fear that had been her companion since her father's murder seemed to recede, at least temporarily, in the shelter of the cave with the steady presence of this enigmatic cowboy nearby. As the evening wore on, the storm showed no signs of abating. Thunder continued to crash overhead, and rain poured down in unrelenting sheets, transforming the landscape outside into a world of water and shadow. "We might as well get some rest," Zach suggested, arranging his saddle as a makeshift pillow. "Storm like this could last all night." Lily nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Using her folded shawl as a cushion, she lay down near the fire, its warmth a comfort against the damp chill of the cave. "Mr. Blackwood," she said after a moment, "I never properly thanked you for what you did yesterday. You risked your life for a complete stranger." Across the fire, Zach's expression was unreadable in the flickering light. "Get some sleep, Miss Bennett. We've got a long road ahead." Despite her exhaustion, Lily found sleep elusive. The storm's fury, combined with the strange intimacy of sharing this small space with a man she barely knew, kept her mind active long after Zach's breathing had settled into the deep rhythm of slumber. She watched him across the dying fire, wondering at the circumstances that had brought him to that lonely stretch of road just when she needed him most. Eventually, lulled by the steady sound of rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of running across endless plains with Victor always one step behind her. She woke with a start, disoriented in the gray half-light of dawn. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent and the gentle dripping of water from the rocks outside their shelter. Zach was already awake, crouched at the entrance to their makeshift cave, scanning the landscape. "Morning," he said without turning. "Sleep well." "Well enough," Lily replied, stretching out the stiffness from her improvised bed. The storm has passed, left quite a mess behind. He gestured to the muddy terrain outside. Ground's too soft for fast travel. We'll have to take it slow today. They broke their fast with the last of their provisions, then prepared to continue their journey. The world outside their shelter had been transformed by the night's deluge. Shallow pools dotted the landscape, reflecting the pale blue of the morning sky, and the usually dusty earth had turned to thick mud that sucked at their boots as they readied the horses. Progress that day was indeed slow, their mounts picking their way carefully through the sodden landscape. By midday, they had covered less than half their usual distance, and Lily could sense Zach's growing frustration. "We're making ourselves easy targets, moving this slow," he muttered as they paused to rest the horses on firmer ground atop a small rise. "You think Victor is still following us?" Lily asked, shading her eyes to scan the horizon behind them. "A man like that doesn't give up easily." Zach's expression was grim. "And now he's got wounded pride to fuel his pursuit." The thought sent a chill through Lily despite the warmth of the day. "What can we do?" Zach considered for a moment, studying their surroundings. "Change our route. Head southwest through the brush country instead of taking the main trails west. It's rougher going, but less chance of being spotted or tracked." "I trust your judgment," Lily said simply. Something in her tone made him look at her sharply, his storm-gray eyes searching her face. "You shouldn't trust so easily, Miss Bennett. Not out here. Not with anyone." "You've given me no reason to doubt you," she replied steadily. He held her gaze for a long moment before looking away. "Let's keep moving. I want to reach the brush country by nightfall." As they continued their journey, the terrain gradually changed. The open plains gave way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and scrub oak, providing more cover but making travel increasingly challenging. By late afternoon, they had entered true brush country, a seemingly endless expanse of thorny vegetation broken only by occasional clearings and dry creek beds. "We'll make camp in that hollow," Zach decided as dusk approached, indicating a small depression sheltered by a ring of gnarled mesquite trees. Good visibility, but hard to spot from a distance. They established their camp with the efficiency of travelers growing accustomed to each other's rhythms. Lily gathered firewood while Zach tended to the horses, and soon a small, carefully banked fire provided warmth against the evening chill. "We need to replenish our supplies," Zach said as they shared the meager results of his hunting a pair of rabbits he'd managed to shoot earlier. "There's a small trading post about a day's ride from here. Not much more than a shack, but the old man who runs it keeps basic provisions." "Will it be safe?" Lily asked, conscious of how exposed they would be at any established location. "Safer than starving," Zach replied pragmatically. "Besides, San Pedro isn't exactly on the main trails. Mostly serves trappers and the occasional prospector. Holloway won't likely look for us there." As night settled fully around them, the vast expanse of stars emerged overhead, brilliant against the velvet darkness. The only sounds were the soft movements of the horses, the crackling of their small fire, and the distant cry of a coyote. "It's beautiful out here," Lily observed, gazing upward. "Frightening in its vastness, but beautiful." Zach followed her gaze to the star-studded sky. "This country has a way of making a person feel small. Some find that unsettling." "And you," he considered the question. "I find it honest. Out here, there's no pretense. The land doesn't care who you are or where you came from. It treats everyone the same harshly but fairly." "Is that why you wander?" For the honesty of it, a shadow crossed his face. "I wander because staying in one place hasn't worked out well for me." Lily sensed she was approaching territory he preferred to avoid, but her curiosity wouldn't let her retreat. What happened when you were a ranger? Why did you leave? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, Zach began to speak. I was stationed in a small settlement near the Rio Grande, lawless place, but the people there were mostly just trying to get by. His voice was low, measured. There was a dispute between a rancher and some of the Mexican families who'd been living on the land for generations. The rancher had political connections, money to spread around. He paused, staring into the fire. My captain ordered us to evict the families. Said they were squatting on private property. I knew it wasn't right. They had legal claim to that land dating back to Spanish land grants, but orders were orders. What did you do? Lily asked softly. I refused. His jaw tightened at the memory. My captain didn't take kindly to insubordination. He went ahead with the evictions while I was detained. Things got out of hand. People died who shouldn't have, women, children. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. By the time I got free and reached the settlement, it was too late. That wasn't your fault, Lily said, instinctively reaching across to touch his arm. Zach's eyes met hers, filled with a pain that made her breath catch. I should have done more, found a way to stop it. What happened afterward? I confronted my captain. Things got violent. His hand unconsciously went to the pistol at his side. He didn't survive the encounter. I've been riding ever since, one step ahead of both the law and my conscience. The weight of his confession hung in the air between them. Lily understood now why he'd been so vague about his past, why he kept moving, why he'd intervened when he saw her being pursued. He was a man seeking redemption for a failure that wasn't truly his. Thank you for telling me, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. It can't have been easy to carry that alone. Something shifted in Zach's expression, a softening around the eyes, perhaps, or a slight easing of the tension in his shoulders. You should get some sleep, Miss Bennett. I'll take first watch. Lily wanted to say more, to offer some comfort or absolution, but she recognized that he had already shared more than he was accustomed to. Respecting his need for space, she arranged her bedroll and lay down, though sleep seemed a distant prospect after what she'd learned. As she gazed up at the stars, she found herself reevaluating everything she thought she knew about Zachary Blackwood. He was more complex than she'd initially assumed, a man haunted by his past, yet still driven to do what he believed was right, regardless of the cost to himself. It was a quality her father would have admired, she thought, and one she was beginning to admire as well. The next week passed in a rhythm of long days of travel punctuated by vigilant nights. They avoided main trails and settlements, taking a circuitous route that Zach assured her would make them difficult to track. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they pushed westward, rugged hills giving way to arid badlands where water was scarce and shelter scarcer still. They reached the trading post Zach had mentioned on the third day after the storm. San Pedro Trading Post was indeed little more than a weathered shack standing alone in a small clearing, its solitary appearance a testament to the isolation of the region. The proprietor, an ancient, leathery man named Jeremiah, asked no questions as they purchased supplies, though his rheumy eyes lingered curiously on Lily. Not often I see a lady out this way, he commented as he measured out coffee beans. Especially one with such fine manners. My niece, Zach interjected smoothly before Lily could respond. Taking her to her husband in El Paso. He's a banker there. The old man nodded, apparently satisfied with the explanation. Dangerous country for family travel. Been reports of bandits working these trails. And Apache activity to the north. We'll keep our eyes open, Zach assured him, paying for their supplies with some of the dwindling funds he carried. As they rode away from the trading post, Lily glanced at Zach with raised eyebrows. Your niece, a hint of a smile touched his lips, seemed simpler than the truth. And my imaginary banker husband, was that necessary? Old Jeremiah is a decent sort, but he talks to anyone who passes through. Better he spreads a story that's of no interest to Holloway. Lily had to admit the logic was sound. You think quickly on your feet, Mr. Blackwood. Comes with the territory. His expression grew serious again. But Jeremiah wasn't wrong about the dangers. We need to be extra vigilant from here on. That night, as they made camp in the shelter of a sandstone overhang, Lily found herself watching Zach as he methodically cleaned his revolver by the light of their small fire. There was something both reassuring and disturbing about the competent way he handled the weapon, a reminder that survival in this harsh country often depended on the willingness to use deadly force. "Could you teach me?" she asked suddenly. Zach looked up, confused. "Teach you what?" "To use a gun properly. My father taught me the basics, but—" She hesitated. "I want to be able to defend myself. If something were to happen to you or if we got separated somehow, I don't want to be helpless." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a nod, he holstered his own weapon and retrieved a smaller revolver from his saddlebag. "This was my backup piece," he said, checking that it was unloaded before handing it to her. "Smith & Wesson, 5-shot. Lighter than mine, better suited to your hand." Lily took the revolver carefully, surprised by its weight despite Zach's description. "It's heavier than it looks. That's good. Help steady your aim." He moved to sit beside her, adjusting her grip on the weapon. "Hold it like this, firm but not rigid. You want control without tension." His hands were warm against hers as he positioned her fingers, his voice low and patient as he explained the mechanics of the revolver. Lily was acutely aware of his proximity, of the faint scent of leather and smoke that seemed to cling to him, of the careful way he guided her through each step of loading, aiming, and firing. "Tomorrow we'll find a place for you to practice with actual shots," he said when he was satisfied with her handling of the unloaded weapon. "For now, just get comfortable with the feel of it." "Thank you," Lily said, reluctantly returning the revolver to him. "Not just for this, but for everything. I'm not sure I'd have survived this long without your help." Something flickered in Zach's eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Miss Bennett. I suspect you'd have found a way." His words warmed her, not because she believed them necessarily, but because he seemed to. In the short time they'd known each other, Zachary Blackwood had shown more faith in her capabilities than most men she'd known her entire life. "I think, given our circumstances, you might call me Lily," she suggested, surprising herself with her boldness. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his usually serious features. "Lily," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "And I suppose you might as well call me Zach." That simple exchange marked a subtle shift in their relationship. Over the next few days, as they continued their westward journey, the formality that had characterized their earlier interactions gradually gave way to a more comfortable companionship. They spoke more freely, sharing stories of their lives before their paths had crossed. Lily told him about growing up in San Antonio, about her father's business and her mother's early death, about her dreams of perhaps one day teaching in a proper school. Zach, in turn, revealed fragments of his own past, his childhood on a small farm in East Texas, his brief stint at a seminary before deciding the life of a preacher wasn't for him, his years as a ranger before everything went wrong. They avoided settlements entirely after San Pedro, keeping to the wilderness where they were less likely to be observed. The terrain had changed again, becoming more mountainous as they approached the Western Territories. Water was increasingly scarce, and game was difficult to find. They rationed their supplies carefully, aware that the journey to El Paso was still long and unpredictable. On the 10th day after leaving Redemption Creek, they crested a rocky ridge to find themselves looking down at a vast expanse of desert stretching toward the horizon. "The Chihuahuan Desert," Zach explained, surveying the forbidding landscape. "We'll need to cross it to reach El Paso." Lily felt a flutter of apprehension. "How long will that take?" 4, maybe 5 days if we're lucky with the weather. He glanced at their water supplies with a frown. "We'll need to find water before we attempt the crossing. There's a spring about a day's ride south of here, if I remember correctly." They made camp early that evening, using the remaining daylight to rest and prepare for the challenging desert crossing ahead. While Zach hunted for their dinner, Lily took the opportunity to wash in a small stream they'd discovered nearby. The cold water was refreshing after days of dust and heat, and she relished the brief moment of normalcy in their otherwise extraordinary circumstances. As she returned to camp, her hair still damp but neatly pinned up, she found Zach already back, field dressing a pair of jackrabbits for their evening meal. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart beat faster. "Feel better?" he asked, his voice a shade deeper than usual. "Much," she replied, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "The cold water was wonderful." He nodded, returning his attention to his task, but Lily had seen something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, or perhaps she simply hadn't noticed it until now. A warmth, an appreciation that went beyond mere companionship. As they prepared and shared their simple meal, Lily found herself increasingly aware of Zach in ways she hadn't been before. The strong line of his jaw, the graceful efficiency of his movements, the rare smile that transformed his face when something amused him, all these details seemed suddenly heightened, demanding her attention. It was dangerous, she knew, to allow such feelings to develop. Their situation was temporary, their alliance born of necessity rather than choice. Once they reached El Paso and the safety of her aunt's ranch, Zach would undoubtedly continue on his solitary way. Becoming attached would only lead to heartache. Yet as the evening progressed and they sat together beside the fire, Lily found herself unable to maintain the emotional distance she knew was wise. There was something about this man, this complex, honorable, troubled man that called to something deep within her. "Tell me something," she said as they watched the flames dance. "If circumstances were different, if you weren't running and I wasn't being hunted, what would your life look like?" Zach seemed surprised by the question. He was quiet for so long that Lily thought he might not answer. "I haven't allowed myself to think about that in a long time," he finally admitted. "When every day is about survival, dreams start to seem like luxuries you can't afford." "But if you could dream," she persisted gently. He sighed, poking at the fire with a stick. "I suppose I'd want land of my own. Nothing grand, just enough for some cattle, maybe horses. A place where a man could build something lasting." His voice softened. "A home, I guess. That's what I'd want. Just a home." The simplicity and honesty of his answer touched Lily deeply. Here was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, who had lived a life of constant movement and danger, yet his deepest desire was for the most fundamental of things, a place to belong. "What about you?" he asked, turning the question back on her. "What would your life look like if things were different?" Lily considered her answer carefully. "I'd still want to reach my aunt's ranch. I've always loved it there, the openness, the sense of possibility." She smiled at the memory. "But I want to teach as well. Aunt Louise used to say the West needs educated women even more than it needs men with guns." "She sounds wise, your aunt." "She is." Lily hesitated, then added softly, "I think you'd like her, and she'd like you." The implication of her words hung in the air between them. Zach's eyes met hers across the fire, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had been willing to articulate until now. Before either could speak further, however, a sound from the darkness beyond their camp brought them both to instant alertness. Zach was on his feet in a fluid motion, his revolver drawn, his body positioned protectively between Lily and the potential threat. "What is it?" she whispered, reaching for her own weapon as he had taught her. "Not sure," he murmured, scanning the night. "Might be nothing. Might be the crack of a rifle shot." Cut off his words, the bullet splintering the ground inches from where he stood. In an instant, the peaceful evening had transformed into deadly chaos. "Down," Zach commanded, pulling Lily behind the meager shelter of a boulder as a second shot rang out. Heart pounding, Lily pressed herself against the rocky surface, the cold stone a stark contrast to the warmth of Zach's body beside her. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped her revolver, but she forced herself to remember his instructions, firm but not rigid. Control without tension. 2 shooters, maybe 3, Zach assessed, his voice unnaturally calm despite the danger. "Northeast and northwest positions." "Victor," Lily whispered, "possibly, or local bandits. Either way, we're pinned down." A voice called out from the darkness, confirming their worst fears. "I know you're there, Bennett. There's nowhere left to run." Victor Holloway's voice, smug and triumphant, sent a chill through Lily's veins. She had hoped foolishly, perhaps, that they had lost him for good. "Send the woman out, stranger, and you can ride away from this," Victor continued. "She's nothing to you, just a job gone wrong." Zach's expression hardened. "Stay here," he instructed Lily. "Keep low and don't fire unless they get close. I'm going to circle around and flank them." "No," she grabbed his arm. "They'll kill you." "They'll kill us both if I don't," he replied grimly. "Holloway wants you alive, but he has no reason to keep me breathing." Before she could protest further, Zach slipped away, moving with a stealth that spoke of years of experience in situations just like this. Left alone behind the boulder, Lily forced herself to take deep, steady breaths, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Another shot rang out, followed by Victor's increasingly impatient calls. "Don't be a fool, Blackwood. I've got men positioned all around you. There's no escape." The standoff continued for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Lily strained her ears for any sound of Zach, terrified that the next shot she heard might be the one that took his life. The night had grown unnaturally quiet, even the usual sounds of insects and nocturnal creatures silenced by the tension in the air. Then, from somewhere to her right, a single gunshot broke the silence, followed immediately by a cry of pain. Another shot, then another. The sharp reports echoed against the rocky terrain, making it impossible to determine their exact source or target. "Lily, run for the horses," Zach's voice suddenly called from the darkness. "Now." Without hesitation, she bolted from behind the boulder, staying low as she sprinted toward where their horses were tethered. A bullet whizzed past her ear, close enough that she felt the disturbance in the air. Another kicked up dirt at her feet. But she kept running, Zach's training taking over zigzag pattern. Use available cover. Keep moving. She reached the horses and quickly untied them, her fingers fumbling with the knots in her haste. As she mounted her mare, she saw Zach emerging from the shadows, running in a crouched position while firing behind him at unseen pursuers. "Go," he shouted as he reached his own horse and swung into the saddle. "Head west. Don't stop." They galloped away from the camp, leaving behind their supplies and the relative safety of familiar territory. Lily bent low over her horse's neck, giving the animal its head as they raced into the darkness. She could hear Zach beside her, urging his palomino to greater speed, and behind them, the distant sounds of pursuit. They rode hard for what seemed like hours, pushing their mounts to the limits of their endurance. The terrain became increasingly treacherous in the darkness, rocky outcroppings appearing suddenly, dry washes cutting across their path, but they dared not slow their pace. Only when they reached a deep arroyo, its steep sides offering some protection from view, did Zach signal for them to stop. The horses were lathered with sweat, sides heaving from the exertion of their desperate flight. "Are you hit?" he asked immediately, dismounting to check Lily for injuries. "No, I'm fine," she assured him, though her voice shook slightly. "What about you?" In the faint moonlight, she could see a dark stain spreading across the sleeve of his shirt. "You're wounded." "It's nothing, bullet grazed my arm." He dismissed her concern, focusing instead on their precarious situation. "We lost most of our supplies back there. Water, food, ammunition." The gravity of their circumstances settled over Lily like a physical weight. They were stranded in hostile territory with minimal resources, pursued by determined enemies, facing a desert crossing that would be challenging even under optimal conditions. "What do we do now?" she asked, fighting to keep the fear from her voice. Zach's face was grim in the moonlight, but his eyes held a determination that steadied her. "We keep moving. Stay ahead of them until we reach the spring. Then we cross the desert and get you to your aunt's ranch." He checked his revolver, counting the remaining bullets. "Holloway won't give up easily, but neither will we." Despite the dire circumstances, Lily felt a surge of something like hope. As long as they were together, as long as this remarkable man stood between her and those who wished her harm, she couldn't surrender to despair. "Let me see your arm," she insisted, approaching him with determined steps. "We can't afford for it to get infected." He submitted to her ministrations with reluctance, allowing her to tear a strip from her petticoat to bind the wound. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but the cut was deep enough to be concerning without proper treatment. "Thank you," he said, as she finished securing the makeshift bandage. "For not panicking back there. Not everyone would have kept their head in that situation." "I had a good teacher," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. For a breathless moment, Lily thought he might say more, might acknowledge the connection that had been growing between them despite all logic and circumstance. Instead, he turned away, checking the horses and scanning their surroundings. "We should move on. We've got maybe a 4-hour lead, but Holloway knows these territories. He'll track us." "How did he find us?" Lily asked as they prepared to continue their journey. "We were so careful." "My guess is San Pedro," Zach replied grimly. "I told you old Jeremiah talks to anyone who passes through." Holloway probably offered a reward for information. They set off again, maintaining a steady pace that wouldn't exhaust their already tired horses. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they pushed westward, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the landscape. Without supplies, they were forced to travel through the night, unable to risk stopping for rest. By dawn, they had reached the edge of a vast plateau, the desert stretching before them like an ocean of sand and rock. In the distance, heat waves already shimmered above the parched earth despite the early hour. "The spring should be about 10 miles south of here," Zach said, studying the horizon with weary eyes. "We'll rest the horses there, replenish our water before attempting the crossing." Lily nodded, too exhausted for words. The night's events had taken a toll on her both physically and emotionally, and the reality of their situation, stranded, hunted, with dwindling resources, weighed heavily on her spirit. As if sensing her despair, Zach reached across the space between their horses and briefly touched her hand. "We'll make it, Lily. I promise you that." The simple gesture and the quiet conviction in his voice restored some of her courage. Whatever lay ahead, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. For now, that had to be enough. The journey to the spring was arduous. As the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky, the heat became oppressive, sapping their strength and that of their horses. They conserved what little water remained, taking only the smallest sips when absolutely necessary. It was mid-afternoon when they finally spotted the grove of cottonwoods that marked the location of the spring, a rare oasis in the otherwise barren landscape. The sight of those green leaves against the relentless brown and red of the desert terrain was like a vision of paradise. "Thank God," Lily murmured as they urged their tired mounts toward the promise of water and shade. As they drew closer, however, Zach raised a hand in warning, signaling for her to stop. His expression had grown tense, alert. "What is it?" she asked, immediately on guard. "Smoke," he replied, pointing to a thin wisp rising from among the trees. "Someone's camped at the spring." Lily's heart sank. After everything they'd endured, the thought of further confrontation was almost unbearable. "What do? We need that water." Zach considered their options, weighing risks against necessities. "We approach carefully. Could be travelers like us or local tribes. Or it could be trouble." They left their horses concealed behind a rocky outcropping and proceeded on foot, moving with caution through the scattered vegetation that surrounded the spring. As they drew closer, they could hear voices, men speaking in Spanish, the clink of cooking utensils, the occasional whinny of horses. Crouched behind a large boulder at the edge of the grove, they observed the camp. 5 men were gathered around a small fire, their horses tethered nearby. They wore the dust-covered clothing of vaqueros, but the weapons prominently displayed at their sides suggested they might be more than simple cowboys. "Bandits," Lily whispered. "Possibly," Zach replied, his eyes narrowed as he assessed the group. "Or just hired guns. Either way, they're blocking our access to water." "Could they be working for Victor?" "I don't think so. These men look local." He frowned, considering their limited options. "We could wait until nightfall, try to access the spring after they're asleep. But that's assuming they haven't been sent to watch for us." Before they could decide on a course of action, the decision was made for them. A twig snapped behind them, and they turned to find themselves facing the barrel of a rifle held by a 6th man they hadn't noticed, a lookout, stationed to guard the perimeter of the camp. "11 tents," the man ordered, gesturing with his rifle for them to stand. "Ahora." Slowly, hands raised, Zach and Lily rose to their feet. The lookout called out to his companions, and soon they were surrounded by all 6 men, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. "What do we have here?" One of the men said in accented English, apparently the leader of the group. "A gringo and his woman sneaking around our camp." "We're just travelers," Zach replied calmly, though Lily could sense the tension in his body, ready to act if necessary. "Our horses need water, and so do we." "We have no quarrel with you." The leader studied them thoughtfully, his dark eyes taking in their disheveled appearance, Zach's bandaged arm, their obvious exhaustion. "Travelers, eh? You look more like people running from something, or someone." Zach remained silent, neither confirming nor denying the observation. "We've been on the trail for days," Lily interjected, her voice steadier than she felt. "All we want is water and a brief rest before we continue our journey." The leader's gaze shifted to her, his expression softening slightly at her direct appeal. After a moment's consideration, he lowered his weapon, signaling for his men to do the same. "I am Miguel Vega," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "These are my brothers and cousins. We are also travelers of a sort." The careful phrasing confirmed Zach's suspicion that they were likely bandits or gun runners, but at least they weren't immediately hostile. "Zachary Blackwood," Zach replied, lowering his hands cautiously. "And this is Lily Bennett. We're trying to reach El Paso." Recognition flickered in Miguel's eyes at Zach's name. Blackwood, the Texas Ranger who killed his captain over some Mexican families. Lily felt Zach stiffen beside her. "Former Ranger," he corrected, "and the story isn't quite that simple." Miguel laughed, a surprisingly warm sound in the tense atmosphere. "Stories never are, my friend. Come, bring your horses. We have water and food to share. It seems we have much to talk about." To Lily's surprise, the next few hours passed in relative comfort. Miguel's group, while certainly operating outside the law in some capacity, treated them with unexpected hospitality. The men shared their food, a hearty stew of rabbit and wild onions, and allowed them to water their horses from the spring. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the cottonwoods, Miguel and Zach conversed in low voices at the edge of the camp. Lily, exhausted beyond measure, found herself drifting into a light doze beside the fire, lulled by the murmur of their voices and the relative safety of the moment. She woke to Zach gently shaking her shoulder. "Lily," he said softly, "we need to talk." Blinking away sleep, she followed him to a quiet spot away from the others. "What is it? Are we in danger?" "No, quite the opposite." His expression was cautiously optimistic. "Miguel and his men have been tracking a group of American gunmen who crossed into their territory a few days ago. From their description, it sounds like Holloway and his hired help." Hope flared in Lily's chest. "Do they know where Victor is now?" "They believe he and his men made camp about 15 miles north of here. They're waiting for someone, probably reinforcements." Zach's eyes met hers directly. "Miguel has offered to help us. His family has no love for men like Holloway, who cross the border to cause trouble and then retreat to American protection." "Can we trust them?" Lily asked, glancing back at the group of men around the fire. "In this particular matter, yes. They have their own reasons for wanting to see Holloway's plans disrupted." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "They've offered to create a diversion, make Holloway believe we've headed south toward Mexico. It would give us a clear path to cross the desert and reach El Paso." The plan seemed almost too good to be true after their run of misfortune. "Why would they help us like this?" A hint of a smile touched Zach's lips. "Apparently, the story of a former ranger who stood up for Mexican families against his own people has spread farther than I realized. I've unwittingly become something of a folk hero in certain circles." Lily couldn't help but smile at this revelation. "A hero, Mr. Blackwood. How uncomfortable that must be for you." "Intensely," he agreed, though his eyes held a warmth that belied his words. "But if it gets us safely to El Paso, I'll endure the reputation." They spent the night at the spring, enjoying the luxury of rest and relative security for the first time in days. Miguel's men took turns standing watch, allowing Zach to get his first full night's sleep since their ordeal began. Lily, too, slept deeply, the combination of physical exhaustion and emotional relief overwhelming her usual caution. In the gray light of dawn, they prepared to depart. Miguel provided them with water skins, dried meat, and basic supplies for the desert crossing, generosity that touched Lily deeply. "Your journey will not be easy," Miguel warned as they mounted their refreshed horses. 3 days across the desert if the weather holds. Stay on the trail I've marked for you and travel only in the early morning and evening. The midday heat can kill." "We're in your debt," Zach said, extending his hand to the bandit leader. Miguel clasped it firmly. "No debt between friends, Ranger. Just remember us kindly when you reach civilization." "And if we encounter any of your business associates?" Zach asked with a knowing look. Miguel grinned. "Tell them Miguel Vega considers you family. It will be enough." With final farewells and well wishes, Zach and Lily set off westward into the desert, their spirits considerably higher than they had been the previous day. Behind them, Miguel and his men prepared for their own journey northward, ready to lead Victor Holloway on a wild chase in the opposite direction. The desert crossing proved every bit as challenging as Miguel had warned. The terrain was unforgiving, endless expanses of sand and rock, broken only by the occasional dry wash or stubborn patch of creosote bush. During the brutal midday hours, they sought whatever meager shade they could find, draping blankets over scrubby vegetation to create small shelters where they waited out the worst of the heat. Water became their most precious commodity, each sip measured and rationed with careful precision. The horses, accustomed to harsher conditions than their riders, fared better than expected, though their pace slowed significantly in the punishing environment. On the second night of their crossing, as they made camp in the lee of a large rock formation, a rare intimacy developed between them. Perhaps it was the isolation, the shared hardship, or simply the growing certainty that they had indeed escaped Victor's pursuit, whatever the cause. The careful distance they had maintained began to dissolve. Sitting side by side beneath a sky ablaze with stars, they spoke of things they had previously left unspoken. Zach told her of his family parents long dead, a younger brother lost to fever, the solitude that had shaped his adult life. Lily shared her fears for the future, her grief for her father, her determination to build a new life despite all she had lost. "I've been thinking," Zach said after a comfortable silence had stretched between them, "about what happens when we reach El Paso." Lily's heart quickened. "What about it?" "Holloway won't give up easily. Even if we make it to your aunt's ranch, he might still come looking for you." His voice was steady, matter of fact. "You'll need protection, at least until the law can be convinced to take your accusations seriously." "Are you offering to stay?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. He turned to face her, his features half illuminated by their small fire. "If you and your aunt would have me, not permanently, I wouldn't presume that far, but long enough to ensure your safety." Lily studied his face, reading the emotions he tried to conceal. "And if I wanted you to stay permanently?" "What then, Zach?" The directness of her question clearly startled him. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Then, with characteristic honesty, he replied, "I'm not sure I'm a man who gets to have permanent things, Lily. My life hasn't led in that direction." "Perhaps it's time for a new direction then," she suggested softly. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted. The connection that had been building between them through danger and hardship, through shared confidences and unspoken understandings, crystallized into something neither could deny. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Zach reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and slightly rough against her skin. Lily leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm not a wealthy man," he said quietly. "I can't offer you the life you deserve." "I've seen enough of wealth to know it guarantees nothing," she replied. "My father was wealthy. Victor is wealthy. Neither fact made one a better man than the other." Her hand came up to cover his. "I'd rather have a good man with nothing than a monster with everything." The simplicity and honesty of her declaration seemed to break something open in Zach. With a softness that belied his strength, he drew her toward him, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that spoke of longing, of hope, of possibilities neither had dared to voice until now. When they finally parted, breathless and wondering, Lily saw in his eyes the same amazement she felt that here, in the midst of danger and uncertainty, they had found something precious and unexpected. "This complicates things," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "Life is complicated," she replied with a smile. "We'll face it together." That night, they slept side by side beneath the vast desert sky, their hands intertwined as if neither wanted to risk the other slipping away in the darkness. Whatever lay ahead, the final leg of their journey, the confrontation with Victor that would inevitably come, the uncertain future beyond, they would meet it as one. The third day of their desert crossing dawned with a change in the air, a subtle shift that experienced travelers recognized as the first hint of approaching civilization. The terrain began to show signs of transition, the endless sand giving way to more varied landscape. By midday, they could see the distant outline of mountains on the horizon, the Franklin Mountains that overlooked El Paso. "We'll reach the outskirts by nightfall," Zach predicted, his spirits lifting at the sight. "Your aunt's ranch is beyond the town, yes?" "About 10 miles east of El Paso proper," Lily confirmed. "Nestled against the foothills, it's beautiful country, nothing like this desert." They pushed forward with renewed energy, the promise of safety and rest spurring them on despite their exhaustion. As the afternoon waned, signs of human presence became more frequent, the occasional fence line, abandoned structures, rough roads cutting across the landscape. Just as dusk was settling over the land, they crested a rise to find themselves looking down at a scattering of lights in the distance, the outskirts of El Paso. The sight brought tears to Lily's eyes, a physical manifestation of the relief and hope that washed through her. "We made it," she whispered, reaching for Zach's hand. He squeezed her fingers gently, his own expression a mix of satisfaction and caution. "Almost. We'll skirt the town, approach your aunt's ranch from the east. Better not to announce our arrival until we're sure of our welcome." They rode through the gathering darkness, bypassing the main roads into El Paso in favor of less traveled paths. The landscape had transformed completely from the barren desert of their crossing. Here there were fields and orchards, streams and stands of trees. The air felt different too, cooler and laden with the scent of growing things. It was fully night when they finally approached the boundaries of the Rocking Bee Ranch. A wooden arch marked the entrance to the property, the ranch's brand silhouetted against the starlit sky. Beyond it, they could see the warm glow of lamplight from a large main house and several outbuildings. "Home," Lily said softly, emotion making her voice tremble. They rode slowly up the main drive, both alert for any sign of danger or unwelcome reception. As they neared the house, a dog began to bark, and moments later the front door opened, spilling golden light across the yard. A figure stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "That's far enough," called a woman's voice, strong and commanding despite its age. "State your business or turn around." "Aunt Louise," Lily called back, her heart racing with hope and anxiety. "It's Lily Bennett, John's daughter." There was a moment of stunned silence, then the rifle was lowered. "Lily, good Lord, child, is that really you?" They dismounted quickly, and Lily ran the remaining distance to the porch, throwing herself into her aunt's waiting arms. Louise Bennett was a tall, angular woman in her 60s, her once dark hair now steel gray, her face weathered by sun and years of hard work. But her embrace was strong and warm, and Lily found herself sobbing with relief at the familiar scent of rosewater and tobacco that had always clung to her aunt. There," Louise soothed, patting her niece's back. "You're safe now, girl. You're home." Over Lily's shoulder she eyed Zach warily. "And who might this be?" Wiping away tears, Lily turned to introduce her companion. "This is Zachary Blackwood. He saved my life, Aunt Louise. several times over. Louise's shrewd eyes assessed the tall cowboy standing respectfully at the foot of the porch steps. A Texas Ranger, if I'm not mistaken. I recognize the bearing, if not the uniform. Former Ranger, madam, Zach corrected, removing his hat. I'd be grateful for shelter for the night, and then I'll be on my way. No, Lily said firmly, surprising both her aunt and Zach with her vehemence. He's staying, at least until we know Victor Holloway isn't a threat. Louise's expression sharpened. Victor Holloway. That snake your father unwisely took into partnership. She looked between them, reading the situation with the acuity that had allowed her to survive and prosper in a man's world. I think you'd better come inside and tell me everything, both of you. Inside the warmth of the ranch house, over cups of strong coffee and plates of home-cooked food, they recounted the events of the past week's John Bennett's murder, Victor's pursuit, their harrowing journey across Texas. Louise listened in silence, her lined face growing increasingly grim as the tale unfolded. I never trusted that man, she said when they had finished. Told John as much when he first brought him into the business. Too smooth by half, with eyes that never smiled when his mouth did. She reached across the table to pat Lily's hand. I'm sorry about your father, child. He was a good man, if sometimes too trusting for his own good. Victor will come looking for me, Lily said, meeting her aunt's gaze directly. He won't give up easily, Louise snorted. Let him come. The Rocking Bee has weathered Apache raids, Mexican bandits, and Comanche war parties. One corrupt businessman from San Antonio doesn't frighten me. She glanced at Zach appraisingly. Though I won't turn down the help of a former ranger, especially one with your particular reputation, Mr. Blackwood. Zach raised an eyebrow. My reputation has preceded me here as well. News travels, even to old women on remote ranches, Louise replied with a hint of a smile. I make it my business to know who's who in these territories, the ranger who stood against his own for the sake of justice. Yes, I've heard of you. With night fully settled and both travelers on the verge of collapse from exhaustion, Louise showed them to separate rooms in the spacious ranch house. Rest now, she instructed. Tomorrow we'll sort out what comes next. Lily's room was simple but comfortable, with a real bed that felt like unimaginable luxury after weeks of sleeping on the ground. Yet despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Her mind raced with the events of their journey, the relief of reaching safety, and the uncertain future that still lay ahead. A soft knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Zach standing in the hallway, similarly unable to find rest. I wanted to be sure you were all right, he said quietly. It's been a long journey. I'm fine, she assured him, though her voice betrayed her lingering anxiety. Just finding it hard to believe we're really here, really safe. He studied her face in the soft lamplight, his expression tender in a way that made her heart ache. You're safe now, Lily. Your aunt seems more than capable of handling whatever comes. And you, she asked, unable to keep the question inside any longer. Will you stay? Now that we've reached El Paso, Zach hesitated, conflict evident in his eyes. I meant what I said before. I'll stay until we're certain Holloway isn't a threat to you anymore. And after that, I don't know, he admitted honestly. This life, a settled life, it's not something I've allowed myself to imagine for a long time. Lily took a step closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Try, she whispered. Try to imagine it, with me. For a moment, it seemed as though he might pull away, might retreat behind the walls of caution and solitude that had protected him for so long. Instead, he reached for her, drawing her into an embrace that spoke of longing, of hope, of a future neither had dared to envision until now. Their kiss was deeper than the one they had shared in the desert, filled with a promise that transcended the danger and uncertainty that had brought them together. When they finally parted, breathless and wondering, Lily saw in his eyes a decision being made. "I'll try," he promised softly. "For you, I'll try." The following days settled into a rhythm of relative normalcy, though underscored by the constant awareness that Victor Holloway remained a threat. Zach integrated himself into the routine of the ranch with surprising ease, his skills as a horseman and his willingness to work earning him the respect of Louise's ranch hands. Lily found herself rediscovering the joy of the place she had loved as a child, the wide open spaces, the rhythm of ranch life, the beauty of the landscape, so different from San Antonio. And increasingly, her joy was intertwined with Zach's presence, with the way his rare smile transformed his face, with the gentle consideration he showed her in countless small ways. A week after their arrival, Louise summoned them both to her study, a book-lined room that served as the heart of her ranch operations. "I've been making inquiries," she announced without preamble, "about your situation and about Holloway." Lily and Zach exchanged glances, both immediately alert. "What have you learned?" Zach asked. "Several things of interest." Louise settled behind her desk, her manner businesslike. "First, it seems Holloway has indeed been seen in El Paso. He arrived 2 days ago, staying at the Grand Hotel in town." Lily felt a chill at this confirmation of her fears. "He's found us." "Found El Paso, certainly," Louise corrected. "Whether he knows you're at the Rocking Bee is less clear, but that's not the most interesting part." Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "I have friends in San Antonio, business associates who keep me informed. It seems that in Holloway's absence, certain irregularities in his business dealings have come to light." Zach leaned forward. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that involve missing funds from several prominent investors, not just John's freight company. The kind that have attracted the attention of federal marshals." Louise's smile was wolfishly pleased. "It seems your Victor has been playing a much larger game than any of us realized." "So the law is looking for him now?" Lily asked, hope rising within her. "Indeed. And not just for financial crimes. New evidence has emerged regarding John's murder, evidence that points directly to Holloway." Louise's expression softened as she looked at her niece. "Your father may yet receive justice, child." The news should have been purely joyful, but Lily found herself troubled by a new concern. If Victor knows the law is closing in, he'll be desperate, more dangerous than ever. "My thoughts exactly," Zach agreed grimly. "Men like Holloway are most dangerous when cornered." Louise nodded, her expression serious once more. "Which is why I've taken the liberty of sending word to the marshal's office in El Paso, informing them of Holloway's presence in town and his likely intention to come after Lily." "You've put them on our side?" Zach asked, clearly impressed. "The law is already on our side in this matter, Mr. Blackwood. I merely ensured they knew where to find both the criminal they seek and the witness they need." She looked between them thoughtfully. "The marshal has requested that Lily come to town tomorrow to give a formal statement. With proper protection, of course." The following morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn day in the high desert. Lily dressed with care for their journey into El Paso, choosing a simple but elegant blue dress that had belonged to her aunt in younger years. She wanted to present herself as the respectable daughter of a successful businessman, not as the desperate fugitive she had been for weeks. Zach, too, had made an effort with his appearance. He had shaved his trail beard, and Louise had found him a decent coat that had belonged to her late foreman. With his hair neatly combed and his clothing cleaned and pressed, he looked less like a drifter and more like the law officer he had once been. "You clean up nicely, Mr. Blackwood," Lily teased as they prepared to depart, though her light tone belied the anxiety she felt about the day ahead. "As do you, Miss Bennett," he replied with a formal bow that made her laugh despite her nerves. They rode into El Paso accompanied by two of Louise's most trusted ranch hands, both experienced with firearms and fiercely loyal to their employer. The town was bustling with activity, a growing community where the cultures of America, Mexico, and the native peoples intersected in a vibrant tapestry of life. The marshal's office was located on the main street, a sturdy stone building that projected authority and permanence. Inside, they were greeted by Marshal James Harrington, a weathered man in his 50s with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Bennett," he said, rising from his desk to greet them. "And Mr. Blackwood, your reputation precedes you, sir." "Seems to be happening a lot lately," Zach replied dryly. The marshal's smile was brief but genuine. "In this case, consider it a compliment. I knew Tom Reynolds, the captain you had your disagreement with, never thought much of him myself. The interview that followed was thorough but not unkind." Lily recounted everything she knew about Victor's embezzlement from her father's company, the confrontation that had led to her father's murder, and Victor's subsequent pursuit of her across Texas. The marshal listened attentively, occasionally asking for clarification, but never doubting her account. "This corroborates what we've heard from San Antonio," he confirmed when she had finished. "Holloway's been stealing from multiple businesses for years, using your father's company as a cover for much of it. When John Bennett discovered the truth, he became a liability Holloway couldn't afford." "What happens now?" Zach asked, his hand resting protectively near Lily's on the desk. "Now we bring him in," Harrington stated simply. "I've got men watching the hotel. As soon as he returns," he was interrupted by the door bursting open, a deputy rushing in with an urgent expression. "Marshal, there's been a shooting at the Grand Hotel. Holloway's gone, and he's taken a hostage the hotel owner's daughter." The news sent a ripple of alarm through the room. "He's desperate," Zach observed grimly. "Knows he's cornered. Any indication where he's headed?" Harrington demanded of his deputy. "Word is he was asking questions about the Rocking Bee Ranch yesterday," the young man replied, glancing apologetically at Lily. "Seems he might be heading that way." Lily's blood ran cold. "Aunt Louise is perfectly capable of defending herself and her property," Zach reminded her, though concern sharpened his voice. "But we should get back immediately." The marshal nodded in agreement. "I'll gather a posse and follow as soon as possible. But you should go now, warn your aunt, and prepare for Holloway's arrival." They rode hard back to the Rocking Bee, pushing their horses to the limits of their endurance. As they approached the ranch, everything seemed peaceful, the usual activities of a working ranch continuing undisturbed. But Zach's instincts, honed by years as a ranger, told him something was wrong. "It's too quiet," he muttered as they neared the main house. "No dogs barking, no one in the yard." They dismounted cautiously, drawing their weapons. The front door of the ranch house stood partially open, an invitation or a warning. It was impossible to tell which. "Stay behind me," Zach instructed as they approached. Inside, they found Louise seated calmly in her parlor, a cup of tea in her hand. Across from her, Victor Holloway lounged in an armchair, a revolver trained casually on the older woman. A young girl of perhaps 15 sat huddled in a corner, tear streaks marking her frightened face. "Ah, there she is," Victor said pleasantly as Lily entered, Zach close behind her. "The woman of the hour. I've been having a delightful conversation with your aunt while waiting for you, my dear." "Let them go, Holloway," Zach demanded, his own weapon raised. "The marshal's on his way with a posse. There's nowhere left to run." Victor's smile never wavered, though a dangerous light entered his eyes. "I'm not planning to run, Ranger, not anymore, but I'm not going to hang for financial irregularities either." His gaze shifted to Lily, a possessive intensity in his expression. "I came for what's mine." "I was never yours," Lily replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "And now everyone knows what you really are, a thief and a murderer." Victor's pleasant mask slipped for a moment, revealing the rage beneath. "Your father should have minded his own business. All he had to do was look the other way, take his share of the profits, and everyone would have been happy." "My father was an honest man," Lily said, her chin lifting defiantly. "Something you could never understand." "Honest men die poor," Victor sneered, "or just die like John did." The casual cruelty of his words sent a surge of anger through Lily. "You won't get away with this. Even if you kill us all, the law knows what you've done." Victor's expression turned calculating. "Perhaps, but I can still ensure you don't live to testify against me." His finger tightened on the trigger of his revolver, still aimed at Louise. "Starting with your troublesome aunt." What happened next unfolded with the swift, brutal clarity of violence. As Victor began to squeeze the trigger, several things occurred simultaneously. Zach lunged forward, aiming not for Victor but for Louise, knocking her from her chair just as the shot rang out. Lily, drawing on Zach's training, pulled her own revolver and fired at Victor, her bullet catching him in the shoulder and spoiling his aim. Victor howled in pain and rage, his shot going wide. Before he could recover, Louise had produced a small derringer from the folds of her dress and fired, the bullet striking Victor in the chest with deadly accuracy. "Always keep a hideaway piece," she remarked calmly as Victor collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across his fine waistcoat. "First rule of survival out here." In the stunned silence that followed, the young hostage broke into fresh sobs. Lily hurried to comfort her while Zach checked Victor for signs of life. Finding none, he looked up at Louise with newfound respect. "Remind me never to underestimate you, madam," he said. Louise sniffed dismissively, though there was a slight tremor in her hands that betrayed her emotional state. "A woman doesn't build and maintain a ranch in these territories by being helpless, Mr. Blackwood, nor by missing what she aims at." By the time Marshal Harrington and his posse arrived, the situation was well in hand. The young hostage had been reunited with her frantic father, Victor's body had been moved to an outbuilding, and Louise was serving coffee as if deadly confrontations were a regular occurrence in her parlor. The marshal took statements from all involved, his expression growing increasingly impressed as the full story unfolded. "Sounds like justice was served, even if not in the manner I might have preferred," he concluded. "Holloway was wanted for murder and fraud. No jury would have acquitted him." "So it's over?" Lily asked, hardly daring to believe it could be true. "Truly over," Harrington nodded. "As far as the law is concerned, yes. Victor Holloway won't be troubling anyone again, and with his death I'd say the threat to you has ended as well." As the marshal and his men prepared to depart, taking Victor's body with them for proper burial in town, Lily found herself standing on the porch beside Zach, watching the sunset paint the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. After weeks of danger and flight, the peace of the moment seemed almost unreal. "What happens now?" she asked softly, echoing the question that had hovered between them for days. Zach was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice held a certainty she hadn't heard before. "Now," he said, turning to face her, "if you'll have me, I'd like to stay. Not just until the danger passes, because it has, but permanently." Joy bloomed in Lily's heart, spreading warmth through her entire being. "Are you certain? This life a settled life, it's what you want. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with gentle strength. I've been running for so long I forgot what it meant to have a home. You reminded me. His eyes, usually so guarded, now shone with open emotion. I love you, Lily Bennett. I think I have since the moment I saw you running across that dusty plain, refusing to surrender even when all hope seemed lost. Tears of happiness welled in Lily's eyes. I love you too. I think I knew it somewhere deep inside when you rode between me and Victor that first day, this stranger who was willing to risk everything for someone he didn't even know. Their lips met in a kiss that sealed the promise between them, a promise of partnership, of love, of a future neither had dared to imagine before fate had brought them together on a lonely Texas road. From the doorway of the ranch house, Louise watched them with a knowing smile. She had seen the connection between them from the first moment they'd arrived, exhausted and weary but already bound by something deeper than mere circumstance. About time, she murmured to herself, turning back inside to give them privacy. Been needing a good foreman around here anyway. In the years that followed, the Rocking Bee Ranch flourished under the combined care of Louise, Lily, and Zach. The older woman gradually ceded more responsibility to the younger couple, watching with satisfaction as they built on the foundation she had established. Zach's skills as a former ranger proved invaluable in managing the ranch and its growing herd. Under his guidance, the Rocking Bee became known throughout the territory for the quality of its stock and the fair treatment of its workers. The nightmares that had plagued him since his ranger days gradually faded, replaced by the peace he found in honest work and the love of the woman who had changed his life. Lily, for her part, established a small school on the ranch property, fulfilling her dream of teaching while ensuring that the children of ranch hands and nearby homesteaders received an education that would serve them well in the changing West. Her father's murder had been avenged, and though she would always miss him, she found comfort in building a life that would have made him proud. 2 years after their arrival at the Rocking Bee, Lily and Zach were married in a simple ceremony on the ranch, with Louise beaming proudly and the entire community gathering to celebrate their union. By then, their story had become something of a legend in the region, the tale of a woman fleeing for her life, a cowboy who rode between her and danger, and the love that had bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. Their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor Louise after both their mothers, arrived the following spring, a strong, healthy girl with her father's storm-gray eyes and her mother's determination. A son followed 2 years later, John Zachary, named for the grandfather he would never meet and the father who adored him from his first breath. On warm evenings, when the work of the day was done, Zach and Lily would often sit together on the porch of the home they had built on the ranch property, watching their children play in the yard and marveling at the life they had created together. "You ever regret it?" Lily asked him once, as they observed Eleanor teaching her little brother to rope a practice post, her small face serious with concentration. Giving up the freedom of the open road for all this responsibility. Zach's arm tightened around her shoulders, his expression softening as he gazed at their children. "Not for a single moment," he replied with quiet certainty. "Some men spend their whole lives searching for meaning, for purpose. I found mine the day I rode between you and Holloway." Lily rested her head against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. "Who would have thought that running for my life would lead me to everything I never knew I wanted?" "That's the thing about life," Zach mused, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes the darkest moments lead us to the brightest futures. You just have to be brave enough to keep moving forward." As the sun set over the Rocking Bee Ranch, painting the sky in the fiery colors of a West Texas evening. Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From terror and tragedy had come love and family. From desperate flight had come a place to belong. The road had been dangerous and uncertain, but it had led them home to each other, to their children, to the life they had built together on this land they both loved. And she wouldn't have changed a single step of that journey, for it had brought her to exactly where she was meant to be.